Welcome, everybody, to the Ben and Sway Show. We've got a unique opportunity here in Geneva at the United Nations to interview Florian. We'll have Florian introduce himself and we'll explain what we're doing here. So, Florian, welcome to the Ben and Sway Show. What do you do here at the UN? And tell us a little bit about what we just participated in.
Thank you, Russ. So I'm Florian Steierer. I'm working here at the UNECE and FAO Forestry and Timber section. That's a joint section between two UN entities, and I'm in charge of forest products markets and marketing. And we just sat through a 3-hour meeting on forest products markets in North America, in Europe, and the Russian Federation.
Yeah, and it was very interesting, and thanks for inviting me and letting us be part of it. So we talked about cross-laminated timber, which is a big deal globally, but in particular in Europe, it's really taken off here. And then we talked about some other things that we can touch on here from Russia that I thought were very fascinating. And some of the challenges that we heard are transportation to markets, and certain parts of Siberia and others have a really tough time reaching markets where other places might have trouble with raw resource. So what does so is this like Forest Products Week or European Forest Week or something like that? Did I see that correctly?
That's correct. We call it the European Forest Week.
Okay.
It's the 5th of its kind. So it is a get-together of experts from many countries, European, North American, and countries from Russia and Central Asia and the Balkans. And we discuss here the big theme of the topic of the week is the circular economy and the role of forest products in that circular economy. And we have different member states at different levels of engagement on this kind of circular economy. I think the Europeans are really advanced on that, and North America is catching up and learning about the circularity. So that's a big part of the discussion. Yes, there was a whole day on circular economy and the discussion of wood products in that.
Well, not to belabor it too much, but let's explain what the view is of the circular economy. I think I have a pretty good idea of what it is, but in those sessions, I know there was kind of some learning and some establishing of things. What is the circular economy in your view?
I mean, the circularity aspect of that is discussed. I mean, there is a lot of discussion, even here in the session between member states. Do we talk about circular economy or circular bioeconomy or bioeconomy? So there are different aspects and angles to look at that. I personally believe that it would be good to talk about circular bioeconomy, because that's the biggest advantage for the forest products, that they're bio-based.
Yes.
And so they are regrowing resource. They're not tapping into a kind of finite resources. They are infinite if we manage it sustainably. And the other aspect, which I personally believe, is the wood products sector is not a purely circular. I always take it as a spiral, which either goes up or goes down.
Right.
Because the fibers are breaking down in the process of the cycling and recycling. And so it is a carbon cycle. So at the end, there is wood energy or decomposition, with many steps of using and reusing it before, but in the end it will turn back to CO2 and be reabsorbed by the forests.
Right. Yeah, and that's the first time I really got to see it. I was on a tour from Copenhagen to Växjö, and Växjö, Sweden, has kind of become the greenest city in Europe according to certain people. And they were focused on building the new modern wooden city. But the way it was explained to me was that the circular economy comprises utilizing the resource and then building a series of businesses that are able to take and add value to the byproduct or primary product of another one of those businesses, and building multiple businesses, taking and adding as much value as possible, and then having the recyclability and reusability of the product in its next life, so to speak. And I think that's what's really interesting about CLT. It's new, we're all talking about it, but are we going to start looking at it in ways that we can deconstruct it, reuse it, and recycle it?
I think that will come. I mean, if you look at the furniture sector, what IKEA is doing, IKEA is very popular in Europe, and many furnitures are bought by customers by IKEA, and so IKEA is looking into the recyclability and reusability, so without kind of breaking down the fibers again, but kind of to reuse the same thing again, and to also have several uses of that, to renting out uses. So CLT might not be the same thing, but that's also one of the big topics I'd like to discuss more, is the modular aspect of CLT and CLT buildings and the standardization between different angles and parts of the building.
Yes.
So that you can easily, cost effectively have producers who are professional and most experienced and cost effective in one module, and then be kind of competing on the market with different other producers. So the construction company can put that together as a modular building, and then also think about the second life, afterlife, or reusability
Yeah.
of that. Just to tell maybe your viewers, we're here in Geneva, and right next door outside the building here, we have the Opéra des Nations. That is a temporary building. That was an opera which was built first temporarily in Paris because they were refurbishing and renovating the opera there. So they built a CLT building of an opera. And so they rented there. The opera was shown there. They had all the abonnements had it there. And then once the opera in Paris was finished refurbishing, they sold it to Geneva. They built it outside the Palais des Nations here. It has been running there for 1.5 years. It's a CLT building, and now they've refurbished their own opera here, and it is now going for the third time to China. So that's the
Wow.
best example of a CLT reuse, and reuse without big waste. And so
That's fascinating.
I can provide you with a link for that, and
Yeah.
you maybe can attach the kind
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
rapid build-up for
Yeah.
that in your.
Yeah, we'll put the connectivity in there for that, because I
Right.
think it's fascinating. The other thing that we have in places like Seattle is we've got this incredible market for reused 100-year-plus old heavy timbers that are in these old warehouses and other things. When in the late 1800s, early 1900s, timber was readily available, and we had all this big old growth, and so they were cutting these huge beams. And I forecast that in 100 years, when we start redeveloping, for whatever reason, an area, and the CLT hotel or the CLT apartment complex or home is going to get redeveloped into something else in the future. I think when they start to take that apart, depending on where everything has gone, that will be a premium product because it's got that recyclability, but it also tells a story. And a lot of the people we see now that are taking these heavy timbers, they're either taking them as is, or they're refurbishing them somehow or restaining them. And they're going into these new structures and they're telling a story. And the owners love it because they go in and they see this grand beam and they tell the story of that. And it's a really great story. And it is the circular economy and it is the reuse of something. And in that case, what was so cool about it, in my opinion, is there was no intention to reuse it. It just happened because of the viability of solid wood.
I think it comes with the nature of the CLT walls. I mean, these are big pieces of nice wood glued together.
Yeah.
And so the bigger the piece, the higher the likelihood of being recycled because it has many purposes in the future because you will break it down like in recyclable fibers for paper. You can recycle it, but the length of the fibers will break down.
Right.
And the same is true for these massive walls. You can use it the first time as a big wall, and then you might cut out the next one, and then you end up with a smaller piece. But each of the pieces then will talk a story. I've never thought about that, but I think that's very similar to this recyclability of
We talk
of
about
different products.
the opera house. You know, that's telling a story in and of
Absolutely.
itself. And now people in China will be able to say, wow, the Paris Opera is in here, the Geneva Opera is in here, and
Right.
now our opera.
Exactly.
It becomes something that maybe wasn't expected the first time around, which is pretty exciting.
And it can travel and can be reused because of these advantages of being light at its kind of standard dimensions. You can put them easily on a truck and ship them anywhere in the world.
That's great. So you also talked to me about this particular meeting and presentation about how it's moved from all day and informational data to telling stories and having people like me. Star Enzo was here, and then we had a couple gentlemen from Russia that were also talking. I thought it came together very nicely and allows, and I just like your point of view on it, but allows the market segment reports that go on in all these different parts of each country and region to have a little bit more flavor to it. Is that what you were hoping for, and is that what you've got out of this?
We got very positive feedback. So, I mean, we did not go through the markets one by one. We have that information available in print. We have it available on the website. We have fresh information from member states, forecast for the next 15 months. So how member states think that the market will evolve. So we have that information, but going into the details would not meet the kind of, or would not inspire our member states about the markets and what markets can do.
Right.
We are here to more discuss about what potential we have and where can we go. And we've seen from your presentation and the presentation from Europe, from Stora Enso and from Russia, that the market is very dynamic,
Right.
that CLT is growing very fast. There's a huge potential, not only in North America, not only Europe, but also globally. There are hotspots, as Mr. Steiner said, in Asia Pacific. Japan has a huge program on CLT building in the future. So these stories, we want to give feedback to the policymakers and decision makers from the member states, from the ministries, on what is possible, what's the view from the private sector, what are the dynamics behind that developments, and also what can the decision makers at the policy level do in order to increase the potential in the future.
I think too, it's interesting, talking with Richard from Stora Enso. This market is bigger than all of us in terms of CLT. And so bringing people together to share things, and we were talking about adhesives and we were talking about layups, and I think having the opportunity for people to work together and talk together about different challenges, and we talked also about the larch in Russia and the differences there. This creates a unique opportunity for there to be some gravity to a market report that just talks about cubic meters or talks about millions of board feet, and allows some people to maybe make some interactions that can turn into real business that can have long-lasting effects. I think that was very interesting, and I could tell the interest from everybody. Even though the language barrier was there, there's a mutual respect and understanding, I think.
Yeah, and we could also see the inspiring examples we have already in the cities. So we bring the forest, we're not only turning the burning forest into sustainable cities, but we bring the products from the forest and from the industries and from the innovators to the cities, even though you might not see it in the first glimpse that this is a building out of CLT or glulam beams or other wood products. They are in the cities already today, and we have these kind of great examples. And they serve without people noticing that this is a very low carbon footprint, a very light building. We've heard about that they were able to build in places where normally no other building could be placed, on top of tunnels or other things. Yeah. So there are huge advantages which were really inspiring today. Again, even though we've already discussed CLT many times here, there's always a new angle to take a look at. And I personally believe that also the insulation is a big topic, a big advantage of CLT. If you compare the insulation factor of concrete with the insulation factor of wood, there's a huge advantage of that. You don't need a second cladding for that on the outside of the building.
We're currently having those debates in North America because there's a disbelief that you could build it without insulation, whether it's on the inside or the outside.
Just look at the facts. Look at the R factor.
And if you talk to people who built it, I hear stories from Andrew Waugh in London talking about how some of the tenants of these buildings, like if they cook, they have to open their windows. Yeah. If they watch television, they have to open a window because as soon as it warms up, it stays warm. And I think all of us that have been in a mountain cabin or something like that, we recognize that once you heat it up, it stays warm.
Also, another interesting fact is people who live in a wooden building, they feel warmer.
Yes.
There are examples where they've done research where they've had the same room temperature and the people in the wooden building felt warmer, even though it was the same temperature.
Interesting.
So 3 degrees, I guess, if I remember correctly, is the temperature where they feel warmer. Wow. So it lowers the requirement to heat the building even. So
that's interesting.
There's studies on the perception, the feeling of, and the kind of physical, psychological effect of having wood as construction material.
Yeah, I think that we, even in this structure, there's wood everywhere, but it's in a decorative or some other aspect. But if we were able to use it as constructability and aesthetics, that's a win-win. Well, I don't want to take up much more of your time. I want to say thank you for this opportunity to be here, and it's been my pleasure. And you're always welcome to come visit us in Colville, see a CLT plant, and I look forward to working further with you.
And thank you very much for coming all the way down to Geneva. It was a pleasure, and it would be a pleasure.
Thanks, Florian.
To come to Colville.
Thanks.
Thank you.